Hey everyone, Matt Jarbo here with 3 Buck Theater. And I've been very vocal about my support of the High Republic coming to paperback and audiobook and comic book form this August, right before, or I think right during Star Wars Celebration. It's going to be a pretty cool thing if you are, in fact, a Star Wars fan. And I did come across this article today on Cineamblend about 5 ways the High Republic could revolutionize the movies. And I think it is worth discussing because even though Lucasfilm has not come out and said that this is going to tie in at all to the feature films, I would argue that at this point it absolutely has to. The High Republic is essentially the EU 2.0, except this time it's actually going to be canon. It's actually going to be taken into consideration when moving forward with either new television or new feature films, or probably even new video games. I mean, we know that Lucasfilm very much wants to kind of have a clean slate following the Skywalker Saga, and with that movie now out of theaters and it's coming to home video here in just a couple weeks, or I think very soon, a lot of people are kind of looking forward to the future to see what is going to be coming next. And it's not just going to be The Mandalorian. I mean, we're hearing, talks that Cassian Andor and Obi-Wan, those shows are currently delayed, but we know that there's a lot more on the horizon. But the only new piece of tangible information that we have concerning anything other than The Mandalorian is really the High Republic. So it'd be kind of cool to take a look and see what this author is saying as being the top 5 ways in his mind that could revolutionize the movies with this new particular publishing initiative. So I thought it'd be kind of fun, like I said, just to dive into it. So he says here that the High Republic is set in a time where the Jedi are thriving. To say the High Republic is a great time to be a Jedi is an understatement. The galaxy is largely at peace, thanks in large part to the destruction of the Sith Empire. That's not to say there aren't a few outliers hanging out in the far reaches of the galaxy, but for the most part, the Jedi are the dominant force in the battle between the light side and the dark side of this era. I mean, we do know about this from from the movies, where we find out that there haven't been any Sith for thousands of, or like 1,000 years. There's a long time without seeing any Sith. And so, yeah, it would make a fair amount of sense for all of us to kind of go, okay, to kind of go into this time when the Jedi are unopposed by the dark side, not aware of what is going to be coming in the subsequent centuries. And that, again, is one of the things I really love and I hope gets explored in the High Republic, and I believe that it will. I've given my thoughts about this, about tying everything into China, so on and so forth. But I really do feel that what we're going to see here is a whole new storyline that's going to set up the fall of the Jedi. And I think that's going to be something that is cool. Now, 200 years is a very long time to kind of set up that particular domino fall, but I think they could probably pull it off. Now, the next thing here he talks about is that there's a new villainous faction of space Vikings called the Nihil, saying here crime syndicates and villains outside of the Empire and First Order have been around in Star Wars lore for a long time, but they never really got a lion's share of movie screen time. Jabba the Hutt's true power as a crime lord was never touched upon in Return of the Jedi, and while Solo, a Star Wars story, seemed primed to put crime syndicates at the forefront of its story, any sequels were killed. And again, the rumor on that one is we're hearing that potentially a Lando Calrissian show could be coming to Disney Plus. Now, I don't know if that show is going to take place post the events of Solo, before the events of A New Hope, or if it's going to take place after the events of Return of the Jedi, and then have a younger Luke Skywalker and Lando Calrissian team up, and therefore interact with the Mandalorian, which, given Disney and their propensity for synergy, does ultimately, to me, feel very much like what's going to be happening. But anyway, the article continues here with, I've always loved the storytelling potential of lesser criminal organizations in Star Wars, and there's some real potential in the High Republic's Nihil. The concept art of this Viking-like faction looks like Mad Max has come to life in Star Wars, and I'm eager to see how they pose a threat to the era of peace. They may not be as fearsome as the First Order or have a weapon as devastating as the Death Star, but they have to be a major problem for somebody. Well, I mean, to be fair, was the First Order ever really that scary? I mean, it really wasn't. In my mind, it really wasn't. And the reason why I say that is because, yeah, they had Starkiller Base, which hollowed out the Jedi planet of Ilum, which is where the Jedi go and get their Kyber crystals. So that's going to put a bit of a damper in trying to find, new Jedi for the future. But I would argue at this point, the Jedi Order is probably done in regards to the end of the Rise of Skywalker. At least that's my take on it. But the Nihil feel like the type of people that are going to be very vast in their enterprises, and they're going to be very hard to pin down, and they're going to be very sneaky, and they're going to operate outside of what the Jedi can really do in regards to them being kind of like Texas Rangers or peacekeepers, so on and so forth. And I think that they're going to be really kind of a hard thing for the Jedi to handle. Now, one of the things I kind of view from this, as weird as it is in the show Star Wars Resistance, they do deal with a band of basically space pirates throughout the first season. And I look at the Nihil like that, or the Nihil, whatever you want to call them. I look at them a little bit like that. So I'm not too sure what exactly is going to happen in regards to that, but I do kind of feel that they are going to be run from the sidelines by somebody with a much more nefarious plan. And that could be where we do get a bit more of this next bit. It says here, the opportunity to flesh out major dark side lore on the screen. Saying, while we're still in the dark about the events that transpire in the High Republic, but knowing what comes after has confirmed one thing: the talk of the Sith's destruction has been highly exaggerated, and while the Jedi are living large and protecting the smaller issues in the galaxy, the great power is slowly building within the dark side. I'm referring, of course, to the continual line of Sith that eventually led to the rise of Sheev Palpatine. Palpatine is estimated to be in his 40s at the start of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, so I wouldn't expect to see him around. I am willing to bet, however, that Darth Plagueis could come into the story as one of the most fearsome dark side users out there. The High Republic introducing Plagueis could be huge for the film universe and an important character we're showing on the big screen. Here's the thing with that, though. They lost me on that one. Plagueis should have been the bad guy of the sequel trilogy. If this seems to make the most amount of sense, right? Like, was Snoke Plagueis? No, Snoke was Palpatine. We know that. Fine. Cool beans. Like, I saw that coming. I am absolutely okay with that. But Plagueis should have been far more influential on Palpatine. In at least Rise of Skywalker, we should have gotten a little bit of that information about who he was and how he came back and how it came to be, because then it would tap into deeper Star Wars lore. And I think that would then get a lot of people who do love the lore of Star Wars back on board. I think the fact that they kind of skirted past that really hurt it. So here we could see that. But Darth Plagueis ties into Palpatine, which ties into the Skywalker Saga, and that may not be something they want to touch upon just yet. So giving us the dark side lore of Plagueis, even though there has been a Plagueis book, which I don't know if that's a Legends story now, I believe. So that may be something that they end up just kind of moving away from. I don't think they're going to give us Plagueis. There's been talk online I've seen of potentially making it Darth Bane, even though Bane was, I think, a few hundred years before Palpatine. This could be somewhere in that same area. Again, it's all non-canon. This is the first time we're really looking at the Republic pre the Phantom Menace. And even though Knights of the Old Republic has been around for 16 years and people love that world, that still took place 4,000 years before the events of the prequels. So really, it's kind of like there's a lot of time for Lucasfilm to kind of wiggle around in, you know what I mean? There's a little bit of time for them to kind of play with. There's a bit of time for them to have a bit of fun. And I think they could probably move a few things around and make sure that it's all well and good. But this is an interesting part here where he says that he likes the idea of taking the opportunity to tell disconnected stories, saying the High Republic is a period of relative peace in Star Wars, which as I touched on earlier, means there's no large cause to call in the galaxy to action. That's incredibly liberating in regards to Star Wars, which has been in this near constant state of war since Episode 1. Now, there are going to be people out there that are going to look at that line and go, yeah, but Star Wars, man, like wars, man. Here's the thing with that, though. Lucas is extremely anti-war. So, it was a bit of an allegory. When they had that little thing pop up and it's all like, not pro-war, people lost their mind on that one because they didn't fundamentally understand Lucas and his train of thought. It's always cute when people who don't know Star Wars are trying to argue the philosophy of Star Wars. It's really funny. So anyway, Uh, yeah, I'm kind of being a jerk. It's fine. He says here, it's really hard to pull the story away from the intergalactic conflict of that magnitude, which inevitably makes all stories in Star Wars connected in some way. Which is true. It would be connected in some way. And eventually the Jedi are going to be connected to something we get, probably through Yoda, something we're familiar with. And that does make the most amount of sense, although Yoda probably doesn't have the kind of precognitive ability to see that far in the future, considering that Palpatine was able to hide everything from Yoda, who in our mind, in our view, is the most powerful Jedi. Really, I mean, we look at him as being the most wisest of all the Jedis. In reality, though, he got played just like everybody else, which is a big reason why Revenge of the Sith is such a good movie, because it does finally showcase that the hubris of the Jedi is what also caused their downfall. They didn't see it coming, and that's why Palpatine was such a formidable villain that I would have loved for him to have been a bigger role in the sequel trilogy, but being that formidable villain and not hiding behind an avatar like Snoke. Anyway, it goes on to say here, and this is what I kind of disagree with. It says here, I know it sounds blasphemous to say this in the MCU era, but Star Wars would be much better if it were disconnected. This is vast and expansive universe has felt small due to the Skywalker Saga, and now it can flourish and branch out in the High Republic. I'm not saying characters can never cross over, but I'd also like to see eventual stories that make it adapted for the big screen to be entirely disconnected from each other. It's probably wishful thinking if another trilogy is on the way, but we can dream. And I actually disagree on that front. Because by having the disconnected story aspect, it ultimately does, it goes against it's the antithesis to what the High Republic is. The High Republic, this whole thing is about creating an interconnected universe of stories telling one large tale that is going to have an actual ending, which I did also chuckle at that as being on the whiteboard in the High Republic trailer video that they put out, because that's something that was a big problem with the Skywalker Saga, or with the sequel trilogy, was it didn't feel like there was a solid endpoint in play, and a lot of people criticized that. And that, to me, having that there was definitely an Easter egg that they were fully aware of fan complaints. And these writers, like Claudia Gray and Charles Soule, that are coming on in to work on this, do understand Star Wars. They get Star Wars and they know what it is they're trying to do. There have been people that I posted this image on the community board yesterday, and one of my regular guys came in, and he's like, I don't know why you're excited for this. This is being written by people who don't get Star Wars. I'm like, no, they get Star Wars, dude. They get Star Wars. It's not hard to figure out Star Wars. It's really not hard. If you look at it from the Eastern philosophies of which it pulls heavy influences from, and you look at it as from what Lucas himself has said about Star Wars, and you apply it to the idea of how Disney likes to run things on a synergistic level and what they're doing, and the fact that Lucas, and this is a key thing to pay attention to here, Lucas sold to Disney because he thought that they would be the ones to keep it going. He purposefully chose to sell it to Disney, to Bob Iger, for $4.08 billion in 2012. He made that decision. He wasn't bamboozled necessarily. I do think there was a little bit of that, give us the treatments for the sequel trilogy and we'll make it a thing. That might have been a bit of icing on the cake, a little bit of negotiation dealing, but at the same time, based upon what I know from those particular treatments, what he wanted to do, man, I'm glad that never happened. I kind of feel, if you think the Phantom Menace was hated, just wait to when they dove back in and doubled down on the midi-chlorians. That would, unless it was going into the world between worlds, and that would have been pretty cool. That would have been, the dagger should have been the dagger of Mortis and Rise of Skywalker. Anyway, I have complaints with that movie. I like it, but I have complaints. But anyway, I do feel that at this point, telling an interconnected story that does have an end point in mind is cool. Look at Marvel, look at Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, and how in Phase 1, at the end of Phase 1, we discover that Thanos is the one pulling the strings. He was largely absent throughout Phase 2, with the exception of popping up a couple times in Guardians of the Galaxy, but he was still relatively absent, and it wasn't until the end of Age of Ultron where we just got we got that bumper of him going, oh, I'll do it myself, and he takes the gauntlet and he goes off, and you're like, oh, okay, like he's got the gauntlet now, it's fine. And then we start leading into Phase 3, and I did feel the Thanos introduction and the Thanos reveal in Marvel leading up to Infinity War was definitely mishandled. I think they'll do better on the next reveal, but still, that is something that fans wanted because it built up to something. And that's what fans wanted from the sequel trilogy that they didn't really get, is that it was meant to build up to something, and it never happened. I mean, the prequel trilogy built up to the fall of the Galactic Republic. The original trilogy built up to the fall of the Empire. And this trilogy, while it built up to the fall of the First Order were basically feckless in the entirety of Star Wars, if you think about it, right? And I think backing them as much as Disney did in regards to, let's say, Galaxy's Edge, it was just a mistake. I really feel that it was a mistake. So it's one of those situations where you have to just kind of look at it and go, they're learning their lessons, which is why they're making the High Republic. It's why they're putting it all together. And so, you know, those are the reasons why this guy wanted to do all that. You know, he has some good points he made there. His name is Mick Jost. He had some good points he wanted to make, and I get that, and I like the idea of how this is going to be the future of the movies. And make no mistake, this is legitimately the future of the movies. If I had to speculate, which is something I like to do, if I had to speculate, I would say that Star Wars is going to really invest. Disney is going to really invest in the High Republic. This is just phase one. Phase one being get the people on board, right? Get the fans on board with a new story, with new characters, really sell it to them, give them this great, epic, grandiose experience, this awesome tale that we haven't seen before at the height of the Jedi. And then start filtering that in through comics and books and other things into making the 2022 movie. And I have a feeling, and this is something that just came to me, that Galactic Star Cruiser, the 2-day, 2-night inclusive hotel experience at Disney World, which I'm going to try to get to next year. It's currently under construction right now. And I think that is going to take place during the High Republic. It just makes the most amount of sense to have it take place during then. I do think they are going to go back and change up Batuu in both Disney World and Disneyland to reflect the High Republic rather than the First Order. It just also makes the most amount of sense, because where do you go from here with evolving that theme park when the First Order has been destroyed? We only had 4 years with the First Order. We had 40 years with the Empire, you know, and there was like a 20-year gap or a 18-year gap between the prequels and the original trilogy to explore those stories, which they did, and people liked that. But people never really connected with the First Order as much as the Empire. And so it's one of those weird things. And I do need to do more of a video breaking that down, because there's a couple things I noticed at the park when I was there that caught me off guard, that was a little bit shady on Disney's end, that I thought was interesting. Anyway, look, I'm excited for the High Republic. I do think High Republic is going to be what revolutionizes the movies. I think it's going to be what connects the movies. I think Kevin Feige is also involved in this. I do. This kind of feels to me like a Kevin Feige is involved, like his fingerprints are all over this, but they haven't said it out loud yet. And that's my gut, what my gut's telling me, because it just feels like that's something he would do. More than Kathleen Kennedy. I think if anything, this might have been his idea, right? Like, okay, how did we make the MCU work? Well, we made the MCU work because we had all the source material and we were able to adapt it, not 100% adapt it, but we adapted most of it to tell these stories with these characters, and people liked it and they wanted to know what was going to come next. And we kept teasing and teasing and teasing. And then also we kept delivering. And when you keep delivering, the audience keeps showing up. And I think this is one of those things that's going to set the groundwork, right? And I've already talked about my theory about how this is going to tie into China. You know, what it means to the truth behind the High Republic is a video I put out last week talking about that. And you should watch it. And yeah, so again, I'm excited for this, but but your mileage may vary. I just wanted to talk more about it, because the more I talk about the High Republic, the more excited I get. It actually was one of the reasons why I'm looking into doing $3 Comics, which is going to be a comic review channel where I do focus quite a bit on Star Wars and other comics that are going on. I did a tester video I posted yesterday on this channel about Star Wars. I think it's like the darkest, or it's like the definitive path, or whatever it was called. It was issue 1. I did about a 14-minute review of it. A lot of you who watched it really seemed to like it. That will be a new channel coming up. And so, yeah, I do want to hear you guys' thoughts on this one. If you made it this far in the video, which I would be surprised if all of you did, do me a solid and type Star Wars in the comment box so I know you made it. And be sure to follow me on social media at mjarbo, and be sure to subscribe and like and all that jazz. I'll talk to you all later. Have yourself a great day. May the Force be with you, and peace out.